teachers at Reddit was the most unique way you caught a student cheating? Not a teacher, but somebody I knew in high school would have her studious boyfriend, who had the same class as she did but earlier in the day, write down all of the answers to multiple choice tests as he took it. He would give her the list of answers in between classes and she would draw a colored spiral of blocks on her hand. Each block corresponded to a question, and the color of the block corresponded to the answer. In high school I had a Spanish teacher reuse the tests from the semester before. My friend kept all of his and I was able to get them from him along with all the answers. I would then stretch out a rubber band and write all the answer on the rubber band. When the rubber band wasn't stretched out, it just looked like a bunch of squiggles on it. As soon as you stretched it out, those squiggles turned into answers to the test. A friend told me about a teacher who caught a student cheating the other day. What happened? The student broke into her office the night before the exam and stole a copy of the exam. There was candy on her desk and the idiot student took some of it. The next morning the teacher noticed some candy was missing and decided to check if anything else was missing. She of course noticed one of the exams was missing. Instead of cancelling the exam, she cut a ½ inch off each exam paper and passed them out to the class like normal. After they were all turned in, exactly one stuck out and was taller than the rest. Boom. Kicked out of school. When I was in high school German class, we had a test where I couldn't answer one question. Not a single one. I was normally a good student, but it had been a bad couple of weeks for me, so I never turned it in. The next day when the old teacher handed them back, I told him that I never got mine. He acted confused and said that it's probably in his office. The following day he gets to class and says, "Thepaki 7. I found your test. You got a B." Had a kid who would raise his hand and say something like, "I need help with number 13 or whatever number." I'm a teacher's assistant. Either myself or the teacher would go over to him and tell him not to speak out loud and give him whatever help he needed that we could give. I work in a special needs school, so sometimes they don't know definitions of words or struggle getting a point across if it's a short answer. Close bracket. It took me a few times to realize, but about 20-30 seconds after this student would say that, another would sharpen his pencil manually, and he would twist the pencil either once, twice, B, 3 times, C, or 4, D, so that the other student could hear it. Imagine manually sharpening a pencil. That kind of click sound. The look on both of their faces when I took the sharpener away and told them to stay after class was great. Great way to cheat though. In college I worked in the advising office of my school. I saw my professor making copies and offered to help, as it was part of my job. He pulled the papers to his chest and said, "No. No. This is the final." Double quote. About 10 minutes later I had to make some copies. Opened the lid, or cover? What do you call that? Comma, and saw the test sitting there. I kinda freaked out a bit and immediately folded it in half. All I saw was the version B. I was such a good student and I really liked and respected my professor, even though the class was difficult, that I couldn't look at the test. The next day, the day of the final, I walked up to him and handed him the test, telling him he should be more careful where he left his things. I sat down to take the test, and it was version A. TLDR. Stumbled upon college final. Didn't look at it and gave it back to the professor. Test was a different version. Not a teacher, but I had this creative writing class for 2 semesters. At the end of the second semester I was sitting in the room taking the final exam and realized that the questions were the exact same as first semester's exam. We had to email the exam in a Word document to the teacher to turn it in, so I just emailed the same document from first semester. He let me use my laptop, even though I don't think the teacher cared. Got an A on it too. One of our assignments in creative writing was to tell a family legend. A girl in the class wrote about time Uncle Steve cheated to pass comb law. Apparently this was back in the 70s or whenever the same course would have multiple exam sessions. Uncle Steve was lucky enough to A. have been growing some magnificent facial hair the whole semester and B. was scheduled for the last possible exam block. He snuck into the 8 AM session and then ran like hell when it came time to turn it in. He then booked it to the library, looked up all of the answers and spent the rest of the day memorizing them. Then, when it came time to take the exam, he shaved of his luxurious facial lawn and sat down to take the exam for real this time. No one apparently recognized him. I'm not sure if I believe it, but it makes for an amusing story. Not super unique, but caught a couple of plagiarizers in my social studies class while marking essays. Was reading the opening paragraph of one paper and it just didn't sound like the student who supposedly wrote it. So I went online and googled the first sentence exactly as written. First result was a web page with the exact essay. So that one was a confirmed cheater. Picked up the next paper in the pile and started reading. Same exact plagiarized essay from the same damn website. Had both guys stay after class the next day for a long chat about why we don't plagiarize. Then made them write it again on their own time. Not a teacher, but I cheated on my history exam by taking pictures of my study guides. I'd excuse myself to the bathroom and take a quick look at it. If I felt like my professor was getting suspicious, after excusing myself twice, I pulled a tampon out of my bag and visibly held it out as I was getting ready to head for the bathroom. He probably thought I had a heavy flow which required frequent changing of the tampon. When I was in middle school, I was in a history class that was studying Greek and Roman gods. We were sent to another room to take the large test at the end of the block or whatever. To discourage cheating, we were told to put up books around our paper so that no one else could see. Due to seating arrangements, the classroom we were in happened to be the science classroom, so the book I chose was one that had all the planets in it. I flipped to each planet's section, which started out with a short blurb about the Greek Roman god that the planet was named after, and was able to get the information I needed. I felt quite clever for that. This is the unique way in which I caught someone. Not the unique method of cheating. As the post title requests, when I was teaching, I had a knock on the door from the teacher across the hall. He told me that one of his freshmen was cheating using a simple cheat sheet in his hand. His classroom had two doors, one at the front and another in the far back. He left both open and came to see me. At the teacher's request, I waited outside of the back door. He walked in, pushed some papers around, walked around the class, and then walked back out the front door. I peered in the back door and saw the student pull the cheat sheet out of his pocket. The room was carpeted and I was wearing rubber-soled shoes. So I was dead silent as I strode in and grabbed the cheater by the shoulder. Who could not believe it? At our school, university, kids cheat two ways. The first is just straight taping their notes on the back of the seat in front of them, since profs never really get up and walk around during a uni test. The second is we have to use these blue books to take our test, which is basically like a 10-page empty notebook and about 1/3 of the overall size. Kids will just write their notes on a smaller piece of paper and mix into the blank pages, or just write really lightly in pencil. In high school, we had an elderly lady subbing for my Spanish class. We had a test that day and she was being really stern about cheating, telling the class she had seen every form of cheating and if we were caught, we were getting a trip to the principal's office immediately. I raised my hand and said, "Have you ever seen the trick where someone carves the answers into their arm and waits for it to scab over so you think it's just a cut but really it's Spanish answers?" She said no. I said good and rubbed my long sleeve shirt. She didn't stop looking at me the rest of class. I used to write, and occasionally do, vocab terms and other stuff on notes on my iPod. This works if your teacher lets you listen to music during class. Warning: if you ever plan on taking pictures of answers on your phone, make sure to delete them. One dumbass in my government class was showing the teacher pictures of the project he was working on and was due on the last day of school before graduating high school on his iPhone. The teacher accidentally swapped too far and saw the picture of the answers and failed him on the spot. Question: why do people seem to take tests so seriously in America? Do all of your exams actually matter, or what's the system? In Ireland you go to primary school for 8 years and secondary for 6. At the end of your 6th year you sit the Leaving Cert. 1 to 3 hours exam on each subject. This is the only exam that ever actually counts for anything in these 14 years. College placements are decoded based on it. So sure, people cheat on class tests sometimes, but nobody gets in that much trouble over it. I wouldn't call this unique, but I think it's a funny story about a stupid person trying to cheat. My mother is a professor in the PhD program at a university, and one student turned in a paper that hit like 85 or 90% on Turnitin. When questioned, the student said that it would have hit 100% if she hadn't changed it up to meet the requirements of the assignment. The student had bought the paper online and demanded full credit, because since she bought it, it was totally her own original work. I spent so much time preparing to cheat that I ended up learning. Back in my day we had to put book covers on all our books using brown paper bags. Being kids, we wrote all over them. Pictures, poetry, who loves who, band names and art. Well, mixed in with all this, I would write tiny notes, smaller on each pass to get more info on the damn book cover. Sometime I went through the process of making a new book cover all distressed looking 3 or 4 times. At which point, I had memorized all I needed to know. I was also really good at writing the Metallica logo, Pot Leaves and Aerosmith logos. Oh, and Carrie still loves Lenny. Not a teacher, but I have a story about a friend that got caught. We were in a Spanish class and had a vocab quiz. My friend next to me didn't study, so before the quiz, wrote the words on a small piece of paper. During the quiz he had the paper on his leg, and would check it every so often to answer the questions. The teacher eventually caught him and told him to stand up. However, my friend had the piece of paper just in the right spot to where it would be stuck up against his leg and the edge of the table. Then the teacher pulled the table out and there goes his cheat sheet floating down to the ground. He was so close. In high school, the student TA in my English class one semester discovered type of pen with a clear hexagonal barrel and twist off cap that had a magnifying effect on text that was placed inside it. Each week before our vocabulary quiz, he would prepare a set of cheat pens by typing the answers in a tiny text point and printing them up on slips of paper that he would roll up and place inside the pens. He would then sit in a desk by the door, sell these pens for $5 a piece as we filed into class. This continued all semester and to my knowledge the teacher never caught on. I'm not a teacher, but yesterday my history class was taking a test and the girl who sits next to me, she moved to the US from France a few months ago. Doesn't speak very good English, and generally seems to be the typical hot dumb blonde type, took out a juicer box. Then she opened up a small flap she had cut on one of the sides of the box and revealed the screen of an iPod Nano, the tiny new kind with a touch screen. She somehow emptied out the box, put her iPod inside, cut out a perfect area for the screen, and resealed it so it looked like new. For the entire period, I watched her scroll through notes on it and ace the test, by the looks of it, while I could barely answer a single question. But then as she walked by my desk to turn in her test, she placed the juicer box on my test. All the notes were written in perfect English and included stuff I doubt even the smartest kid in the class knew. Today our tests were passed back, and she high-fived me when she saw we both got 100%. Fucking French girls. Man. TLDR. The harebrained French girl in my history class is secretly a juicer box genius. My friend sits in front of me in Spanish and math. She stinks at both. If she taps her pen twice she needs help. Followed by the question represented by how many times she does a certain action, like raking her fingers through her hair, which is different every time. If it is multiple choice, I'll kick her chair corresponding to the letter I chose, 1 equals A. If it is open-ended I'll write my answer on a piece of paper, drop it, and move it under her chair using my shoe. Then kick her chair to signify it is there. We've only had to use it twice. Both times we didn't get caught. Not my story, but a close friend back from college. He said that's in high school. In one of his classes his teacher was very deaf, couldn't hear in one ear, and basically was very good at reading lips. Come their first exam of the year, with the teacher standing in the front of the room, kids started to just bow their heads down and literally speak out loud, what is the answer to 12? etc. Softly, of course. Apparently soon enough there was just constant conversation throughout the whole class regarding most questions. He said that soon enough an assistant or another teacher would sit and during tests, quizzes, once teaching staff figured it out. I still find it incredibly amusing to picture a class of 40 kids talking during the test with a teacher standing right up front. My former English teacher told me a story about cheating. Basically, one of her students had once decided to write all the notes on the inside of a water bottle label, then tape it back on so that you could see it from a certain angle. The teacher didn't notice until she saw him looking intently at the bottle. Similar to your story, one of my buddies actually put in the time and trouble of reprinting an already existing water bottle label with answers hidden in the nutrition facts and such. He got caught when he picked up the bottle and examined it too closely. Teacher reaction to such elaborate cheating was priceless. Not a teacher, but one of my friends in high school got a hold of one of those compact mirrors that girls use to put on makeup and put it in his shoe just before the test. He then took his notes and taped them to the bottom of his desk. Since he was wearing loose-fitting shoes, he was able to slip his foot in and out to see the sheet throughout the test, whenever the teacher wasn't looking. TLDR. Never underestimate the power of creativity and above average eyesight. Not a teacher, but the best cheating story I know. So there were a bunch of kids in my high school who you wouldn't see in any class in the whole semester, but they would just turn up for the exam. Everyone knows someone like that in high school. Anyways, this one kid, let's call him Dave, shows up to an English exam. He somehow gets someone to pretty much do the whole exam for him, essay and everything, and he somehow manages to have them pass all of the answers to him. All he has to do is staple the answers to the question sheet and hand it in. So halfway through the exam, he walks up and hands in his work. The teacher takes it, turns it around and reads aloud, "Pass this to Dave." Silence for 3 seconds. Teacher looks right at Dave. Dave looks at teacher and all he can say is fuck. Here was how I used to do it. I used to take a mechanical pen that you could unscrew from the middle. I would take the test in the morning, and at lunch try to remember as many of the questions as possible, or sometimes a buddy managed to get a picture of it, and I would write down as much as possible onto a small piece of paper. I would take that piece of paper and wrap it around the ink cartridge of the pen. If you did it right and only needed a little help, you could see the answers circling the ink. If you needed more info, slowly and quietly unscrew the pen and you have a notes section. One girl got caught and failed the class for doing this. She used too big of a piece of paper and the teacher noticed her trying to rip her pen apart. Unrelated, 2 friends of mine tried to sneak through the ceiling to steal the state tests and fell through the roof. In 5th grade we had an economics simulation where we were supposed to learn about having a successful business. We made little goods and had fake money, and at the end of the year we could use the fake money to buy real goods in an auction. I was bad at it, so I stole one of the stamps used to mark the money, got a date stamp, and proceeded to Xerox fake money which I mixed into the real money. I kept to small bills, didn't make enough to be suspicious, and changed the date stamp to dates that were consistent with the real bills. I had one accomplice. I told no one else. I wasn't caught, and I got a set of bath gels out of it at the end of the year. Surprisingly, I am now a full functioning adult and positive member of society. My dad's a professor. When he gives tests to huge classes, he sets the students in seats according to their place alphabetically and distributes multiple forms so that no one sits next to anyone who has the same test. And he can know what test each student will be administered. Once, when he was grading, he noticed an abnormally low score, below the statistical guessing rate. Even His general procedure in those cases is to check to make sure that a student didn't accidentally skip a bubble line on the Scantron sheet, etc. Well, this student didn't do that. But the answers were awfully similar to the correct answers to a different form. They were, in fact, identical to the test belonging to the person on the student's right. So my dad, being a quintessential geek, calculated the chance that the student would guess randomly the exact same as the person to their right. It was somewhere less than 1 in 2 million. And included this statistic in his academic integrity violation report. I took French in high school. It was pretty relaxed at all levels except one, which had a state-mandated exam that you either had to pass the class or was heavily weighted with your course score. I was good at French and had a friend who was awful. Despite alphabetical seating, it somehow wound up that he sat next to me, since the exam was in a normal room and not the gym. He managed to combine a near-perfect multiple-choice true-false section with a horrible written section where the only points were random sentences he had selected from other parts of the test and rephrasing of the question. Ended up being a pretty solid score. The written was a much smaller section, one that our teacher knew he didn't really get. The teacher told him that he would let it slide and not bring up suspicions he was copying me if he didn't take the next level of French. I work as an exam invigilator. I've never had any particularly creative cheaters. But I did once have a student who I was 95% sure was huffing acetone and Tipex during an English exam. They were doing the work though, and not disrupting anyone else. They were seated at the back away from other students, so I didn't interrupt them. Quite honestly, I wasn't even sure how. As invigilators, we don't know or really have any relationship with the students. And there's not an entry on low-key inhalant abuse in the JCQ examinations conduct book. Not exactly unique, but I play a vocabulary game with my students twice a week. The junior class was doing a little too well, so I knew something was up, but I hadn't caught them yet. Then one fine day, a junior walking down the hall not realizing I was 2 students behind him started bragging about how he was using his phone to go to one of the many websites that will give you a list of Scrabble words. Instead of nailing him on the spot, I had a lot of fun standing on top of him during the game so he couldn't use his phone. I was going to play that game with him until he whined that the other classes must be using their phones. Since the pot called the kettle black, I called him on his cheating. For one of my classes, my teacher was absent for the whole first quarter of the year, so we a sub-temporary teacher. On one of the tests, the teacher had messed up when he checked the multiple choice. He did this for like 5 students. He explained this to us and told us to check if it happened on our test and it was his fault so he would fix it. I noticed it hadn't happened to me, but as all the students are going up, I grab a red pen and mark like 5 of mine wrong, which I got right. I went up and showed him he made a mistake, and with all the commotion he gave me points for something I had already gotten right. I felt really smooth. I don't know if this counts as cheating or just bending the rules, but anyways. When I was in English 20, grade 11/sophomore year as called in other countries, we had to write an essay for our English final in 80 minutes and the topic was given at the start of class. Our teacher told us you can bring in anything to help you with your essay. He was probably expecting books or whatever for quotes and citations. One guy in my class brought in his older brother, an English literature major. The teacher allowed it that time, but any year after he made sure to specify what you were allowed to bring in. The student got 95% on the final. I actually doubt the teacher read the essay. Freshman year during geography class, I cheated for the first time in my life and it was one of the best things to happen to me that year. My teacher was a monotone geezer who would go off on rants about the stupidest things. The material was hard to start out with, so this didn't help. I was good at geography and maintained an A throughout the year, but my friend was not so lucky. He had a solid 50 the first semester, and hoping not to fail the class he paid me to help him cheat. We were both playing football at the time and the coaches had created a kind of code that they used to call plays from the sidelines. The code consisted of different hand gestures and signs that correlated to numbers and words. We created a few of our own signs but used the basics the coaches had taught us. During tests we would communicate using the code. The teacher never caught us because we were the farthest away from his desk and he had really bad eyesight. He ended the class with a B overall and I got $1,000 out of it.